Tinka, the son of the sorcerer. On February 1st, 1986, Uganda breathed again. The guns had quieted. The smoke that had hung over villages like a curse began to thin. The new era under the National Resistance Army had just begun, and though the soil still held fresh grief, hope crept back into homesteads like a cautious child returning after a storm. Children who had forgotten the feel of slates and chalk whispered about school. Men rebuilt broken granaries. Women patched roofs and stitched torn futures with trembling hands. Peace did not arrive loudly. It arrived carefully. And in a small village called Kabuwoko, 10-year-old Tinka sat on the veranda of his father's house, staring at the horizon as though it owed him something. He was small for his age, quiet. His eyes carried the stillness of someone older than his years. His dream was simple. I want to go to school. But in his home, that dream was not simple at all. Tinka was the firstborn son of Saku. Saku was not an ordinary man. He was a healer, a diviner, a man whose name was spoken in lowered voices when illness lingered too long or nightmares refused to leave. He carried herbs that smelled of wet earth and smoke. He interpreted dreams. He stood between the seen and unseen. And as tradition demanded, the firstborn son inherited not cattle, not land, but power. From the time Tinka could walk, his father took him into forests thick with medicinal roots. He taught him which leaves cooled fever, which bark stopped bleeding, which whispers summoned spirits. You are not like other boys, Saku would say quietly. But Tinka longed to be exactly like other boys. He wanted uniforms. He wanted books. He wanted to learn English, the language that seemed to unlock doors. At the edge of the veranda, lost in thought, he did not hear his mother calling. Tinka. She stepped closer and tapped his shoulder. He was startled. What has invaded your thoughts so early, Mwanawange? She asked gently. He swallowed. Mama, I want to go to school. That is all I want. Nante's heart folded in on itself. She had heard this plea before, and each time she carried it like a fragile clay pot to her husband, and each time it shattered. 2 months into peace, a visitor came. Luta, Nante's older brother, alive, respected, educated. He had survived the war not by gunfire, but by knowledge. His English had saved him. His medical training had elevated him. And now he had been appointed Minister of Health in the new government. The village erupted in pride, as stories poured from Luta's lips about tending to wounded soldiers and advising commanders. Saku listened. Quietly. When Nante saw the opening, she took it. If education saved my brother, could it not save our son too? Saku's pride bristled. Is my name not enough for him? It is, she whispered, but let him try. If education fails him, we send no other child. The condition lingered in the air like a drawn blade. Then Saku nodded once. That night before departure, he called Tinka to him. Come here. It was the first time in his life he had asked for an embrace. When Tinka stepped into his father's arms, Saku held him tightly. Then he placed his palm on his son's head and whispered in a language older than memory, a blessing, or perhaps a binding. Remember, he said softly, power is not a toy. Once you unlock a door, you cannot close it. The road into Kampala did not feel like a road. It felt like entering another world. Tinka had never seen so many people moving at once. Women balancing baskets on their heads walked with determined rhythm. Men argued loudly beside stalls overflowing with tomatoes and cassava. Bicycle bells rang like impatient birds. Cars coughed smoke into the air. The city did not whisper. It roared. Tinka walked close to his uncle, fingers wrapped tightly around Luta's hand. Do not let go, Luta said firmly, glancing down at him. This city swallows children who wander. I won't, Uncle, Tinka replied softly, eyes wide, drinking everything in. They passed buildings made entirely of brick. Not mud, not wattle. Brick, straight lines, sharp corners. Windows made of glass that reflected sunlight like captured fire. At night when they arrived at the ministerial residence in Mengo, Tinka froze at the doorway. The house glowed. It glowed without fire. Electricity hummed softly in the ceiling, light steady and unwavering. Does it ever go off? Tinka asked in disbelief. Luta chuckled. Sometimes, But not tonight. Tinka stepped inside carefully, as though afraid he might dirty something sacred. His room was small but dignified. A bed with a mattress that did not sag. A table, a chair, a door that locked. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface of the table. "So this is how ministers live?" he whispered. "This," Luda corrected gently, placing a hand on his shoulder, "is how discipline lives. If you work hard, you build walls like these around yourself." That night, Tinka lay in a bed softer than any mat he had known. But sleep did not come quickly. The ceiling was too white, the silence too different. No crickets, no distant drums, no murmuring forest. Only the faint hum of electricity. He turned onto his side and whispered into the darkness, "I will not fail." The morning they arrived at Namayango College, the sky was clear. The school rose from the hill like a statement. Tall brick buildings, clean paths, boys in uniforms moving with confidence. Tinka swallowed. "Is this all one school?" he asked. "Yes," Luda said with quiet pride. "And you belong here now." Belong. The word felt fragile. Inside the administrative block, the headmaster stood tall behind his desk. "So this is the young man," he said, peering over his glasses. Tinka stepped forward. "Yes, sir." The headmaster extended his hand. His grip was firm. "You are fortunate," he said evenly, "but fortune without effort is useless. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. We do not produce ordinary men here." As they stepped outside, Luda crouched slightly so he was eye level with his nephew. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "You will feel small at first. That is normal. Do not let it stay that way." "I won't," Tinka replied. "You carry our name, but more importantly, you carry yourself." Luda squeezed his cheek gently. "Make your mother proud." When his uncle left, the world suddenly felt larger and lonelier. The first day in class, laughter followed him. Not loud, sharp, precise. "Where did they find this one?" a tall boy muttered. "Village edition," another whispered. When Tinka read aloud, his Uganda rhythm wrapped around English words awkwardly. Snickers. Heat crept up his neck. He lowered his eyes. At lunch, his plate disappeared. At night, water soaked through his mattress. The first punch came from behind. He never saw who delivered it. "Watch where you're going," a voice mocked. He reported to the warden. The warden sighed. "These are boys," he said dismissively. "Toughen up." Toughen up. But how? One evening, as tears slipped silently down his face, a small boy approached his bed. "You are Tinka, yes?" the boy asked. Tinka nodded. "I am Ain," he said, sitting beside him. "They did the same to me last year." Tinka wiped his face quickly. "Why?" Ain shrugged. "Because they can." He leaned closer. "Do not give them your tears. It feeds them." "Then what do I give them?" Tinka whispered. "Nothing." That night, for the first time, Tinka did not feel completely alone. With Ain's help, he improved. He stayed up later. He practiced English. He asked questions. Soon, teachers began praising him. "Excellent work, Tinka. Well done. Top of the class." Praise is sweet, but sweetness attracts insects. The bullying sharpened. Now it was deliberate, coordinated. "You think you're better than us?" one of the older boys spat. "No," Tinka said honestly. A fist answered him anyway. The beating was worse that night. Not playful, not casual, intentional. He lay on the cold dormitory floor long after they left, breath shallow, ribs aching. Something inside him shifted. Not rage, not exactly. Memory, his father's voice. Power is not a toy, but neither is suffering. Slowly he rose. Each step hurt. He took a piece of paper from his trunk, wrote names, folded it. Outside, the night air was cool. Still, he knelt, pressed his forehead to earth, and began to whisper. The language was not English, not Uganda, older. The wind stirred, leaves shivered. The ground beneath his palms felt alive, listening. "Enough," he breathed. "Let justice come." The air thickened, not violent, aware. When he stood, the pain in his body felt distant. He returned to his bed and slept, deeply.
If you're drawn to stories where history meets mystery, where the wind carries more than just dust, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Pearl Mystic Tales for powerful African legends, untold histories, and stories that linger long after the screen goes dark.
Morning began with shouting. "He's burning!" Another voice. "He won't wake up!" Three boys lay shaking in their beds. Sweat soaked their sheets. Eyes rolled back. Doctors came. Thermometers, stethoscopes. Confusion. "No infection," one doctor muttered. "It makes no sense," another whispered. By evening, 5 boys were ill. They muttered in sleep, spoke to shadows, cried out in languages they had never learned. Tinka watched, silent. Ain leaned toward him during prep time. "Do you think it's contagious?" Ain asked nervously. Tinka did not answer immediately. "No," he said finally, "not contagious." Days passed. The boys grew thinner. Their parents arrived, furious and afraid. "This school will answer for this," one father thundered. But there were no answers. When the old village healer arrived at the gates, he stopped abruptly, clutched his pouch. His eyes narrowed. "There is something here," he murmured. The headmaster stepped closer. "What is it?" The old man shook his head slowly. "Something answered." "Answered what?" But the healer did not elaborate. "Life balances itself," he said quietly. "Leave it." And he turned away. One by one, the boys died. Not dramatically, quietly, as if something unseen had simply finished a task. Tinka topped the class that term. He should have felt victorious. Instead, sleep became crowded. The boy stood at the edge of his dreams, not accusing, just present, watching. Sometimes he woke with his heart pounding, not from fear, from understanding. He had crossed something. There was no undoing. In chapel one Sunday, as hymns rose into the rafters, he felt something settle inside him. Power did not disappear. It waited. He was not just a student, not just a minister's nephew. He was Tinka, son of Saku, son of a lineage that did not end because he wore a uniform. Education had sharpened his mind, but blood remembered. And the wind would always answer him. The night the 5th boy died, the wind did not stay in Kampala. It traveled, across hills, across swamp, across red earth paths, all the way to Kabuwoko. Saku was asleep on a reed mat when his eyes opened suddenly. No sound had woken him, no knock, no dog bark, just a shift in the air. He sat upright. The fire in the hearth had burned low, embers breathing softly. But the room felt occupied, not by a body, by movement, by change. He closed his eyes and reached inward the way his father had taught him. Silence answered first, then something deeper, a tremor, not of danger, of activation. His son. He did not speak the name aloud. He did not need to. The cord between father and firstborn does not break with distance. It stretches, and when it vibrates, a father feels it in the marrow. Saku stood slowly and stepped outside. The moon was thin. Clouds moved quickly across it. "The door has opened," he murmured into the night. He had warned the boy. Once you call it, it listens. And once it listens, it returns when summoned again. He felt pride. He felt dread. Both are siblings. At Namalyango College, the deaths were buried beneath explanation. Unidentified illness. Complications. Unfortunate coincidence. The parents demanded inquiries. Nothing surfaced. The headmaster never invited another healer again. He avoided looking too long at Tinka. Something in the boy's eyes had changed. They were no longer soft with innocence. They were measured, watching, calculating, not cruel, just aware. Ain once asked him quietly under the mango tree, "Do you ever think about them?" Tinka did not answer immediately. "Yes," he said finally. "And they will not hurt anyone else." Ain swallowed. "That isn't what I meant." Tinka looked at him then, and for a brief second, Ain felt something vast behind his friend's calm expression. Ain never asked again. Back in Kabuwoko, people began to notice something strange. Saku's herbs became stronger, his predictions sharper. When he spoke of rain, rain came. When he warned of illness, illness appeared. Villagers whispered, "The line is strengthening." Some claimed they saw figures moving behind Saku's compound at dusk, tall shadows that dissolved when stared at directly. Nante felt it too. When she visited her husband at night, she sometimes paused before entering their hut. The air around it felt charged, as though lightning had passed recently. "Have you spoken to him?" she asked one evening quietly. Saku sat grinding herbs in a stone mortar. "No." "Do you know?" He stopped grinding. "I know enough." Nante's voice trembled slightly. "Is he safe?" Saku resumed his motion. Safety is not the question anymore. That answer did not comfort her. Years passed. Tinka grew. His shoulders broadened. His voice deepened. His brilliance became undeniable. He excelled in literature, in debate, in law. He learned to speak English without hesitation. He learned to stand in rooms where men twice his age tried to intimidate him. He watched politics closely, how promises were made, how alliances were formed, how betrayal often wore a friendly smile. And beneath it all, something ancient slept inside him. Not gone, waiting. When he returned to the village during holidays, people stared at him differently. He wore pressed shirts now, polished shoes. But when he stepped onto the red earth, the ground seemed to recognize him. Children stopped their games when he passed. Dogs did not bark at him. Saku observed quietly from the doorway. "You have grown," the father said. "Yes, Tata." "And," Tinka held his father's gaze, "and I remember." That was enough. By his late 20s, Tinka had entered government service. Not loudly, strategically. Committees first, advisory boards, then a seat in parliament. He spoke rarely, but when he did, rooms listened. He had the gift of timing. He knew when to stay silent. He knew when to strike. Opponents underestimated him at first. "Village boy," one senior politician scoffed privately. They did not laugh long. A corruption scandal unraveled around that same man months later. Documents surfaced. Whispers became investigations. Investigations became resignation. Tinka had not raised his voice once, but those close to him began to notice a pattern. Men who crossed him found themselves undone. Careers collapsed. Health declined. Fortunes evaporated. Coincidence, some said. Strategy, others insisted. But in quiet offices late at night, when papers were signed and decisions made, Tinka sometimes felt the air shift. Like that night behind the dormitory. Like the first time the wind answered. One evening, alone in his Kampala home, he stood by the window overlooking the city lights. He whispered softly, not in English. The curtains stirred though the windows were closed. His reflection in the glass did not look entirely alone. The true test came when a powerful minister tried to block a reform Tinka championed. The reform would expose land theft that stretched back years. Names were involved. Important names. Meetings grew heated. Threats surfaced. "You are young," the minister warned him one afternoon in a private office. "Do not challenge elders." Tinka smiled faintly. "Respect is earned," he replied calmly. The minister leaned forward. "You think intelligence protects you?" Tinka held his gaze steadily. "No, balance does." That night, storms rolled over Kampala. Lightning split the sky repeatedly. The next week, evidence leaked. Not from Tinka's office. From somewhere else. Investigations began. The minister fell ill during the hearings. Strange illness. Doctors puzzled. Fatigue. Night terrors. Muttering in sleep. Within months, he resigned publicly. Official reason, health complications. Unofficially, people whispered again, the son of the sorcerer walks in Parliament now, and Parliament listens. Power, however, does not come without erosion. Sleep abandoned Tinka more frequently. The faces returned. The boys from school, now joined by others, not accusing, just present. One night he visited Kabuwoko alone. He found Saku older, thinner, watching the horizon. "I cannot always separate them," Tinka admitted quietly. "Separate what?" Saku asked. "Justice from vengeance." Saku studied his son for a long time. "The world will provoke you," he said finally. "The question is not whether you can act. It is whether you must." Tinka's jaw tightened. "And if I do not? Then you are greater than me." Silence stretched between them. Crickets filled the space. Saku placed a hand on his son's shoulder. You opened the door. Yes. You cannot close it. I know, but you can choose when to walk through. For the first time in years, Tinka felt something heavier than power. Responsibility. In time, Tinka rose higher. Ministerial position, national recognition. He became known as disciplined, incorruptible, sharp. Enemies treated him carefully. Allies respected him cautiously. He funded schools in rural districts, built clinics, championed literacy, perhaps trying to balance scales only he could see. But sometimes during tense negotiations, when a rival smirked too confidently, the air around Tinka shifted. Subtle, barely perceptible. Those sensitive enough felt it, like pressure before rain. And somewhere far from the city in Kabuwoko, Saku would look up from his herbs and nod once. The wind had moved again. Years later, long after Saku passed and was buried under mango trees, Tinka stood alone at his father's grave. He placed his palm against the earth. I did not become only what you wanted, he said softly. The wind rustled the leaves. But I did not abandon it either. He closed his eyes. In the distance, thunder rolled faintly across clear skies. Not a storm, just a reminder. Tinka was educated, refined, respected, feared. He built with brick. He governed with law. But beneath the suit, beneath the speeches, beneath the polished English, the blood still remembered. And when injustice grew too bold, the wind still listened.